Hello, everybody. Welcome back to CMC, guys. How does it feel to be back at the alma mater?
Oh, it's great.
Yeah, the free food still works.
Yeah, had a glass of wine, feeling good.
That was the way to even as seniors to get fed, right? Wasn't it, to come to the Ath and every once in a while.
I was off the meal plan senior year specifically
We
because
may or may not have snuck into Meal House and the app.
Well, that was a great film, guys. I am so excited to have you guys back here and kind of see what you're continuing to work on. What do you think kind of drew you to this story in particular?
Oh, Chris, are you going to come clean about your crypto habit, or?
Yeah, so I do have to admit that I got super sucked into the world of crypto speculation and gambling, to be honest. It was early 2021, going back in time. It felt like everything was going up. 96% of all stocks went up in this period. Crypto was, supposedly offering 1,000% returns on things. And I thought to myself, hey, I went to CMC. I'm smart. I was an econ major. I can figure out how to game this system and make money on it too. And so I got really caught up into it. And I found myself, at 4 a.m. checking crypto prices. And I talked with Zach about this more. He was kind of...
This is like, how do I justify this with making it our jobs?
Yeah, exactly. So I found a way to be like, hey, maybe let's make a film about this and what this actually is doing to me psychologically. Why are we falling down in some of these traps where I know better, yet I still am finding myself wanting to make some of these decisions? I think a lot of it came down to FOMO, this fear of missing out. And so we started reaching out to people on Twitter and Reddit who were behaving in similar ways to myself, or actually much more extreme. And we found Pro, we found Kayla, a number of the folks that you see in the film. We ended up interviewing hundreds of different investors, speaking with a lot of different experts too, and over about a 2.5-year period made this film.
How do you think your views changed over the course of making the film?
Yeah, I think at the moment in 2021, this was the time of GameStop, right? And so I think we, having both been econ majors and IR majors, we're aware that there was this really interesting moment happening where there's a double-edged sword, right? For the first time, people were paying attention to how to invest their money, people all over the world. And they all of a sudden had access to things like Robinhood, or we're talking about these platforms where it was much easier to access the markets. And in some ways, that's a really great thing. Learning about how to manage your money and learning about markets is incredibly empowering. I graduated CMC in 2012 as an econ major. I didn't realize I had to invest the money in my Roth IRA until years later when I had just been putting it in there.
I think you were 30.
We don't really know. We aren't taught personal finance. And I think there was this moment where everyone's seeing TikTok. All of a sudden you're realizing that, should I be doing things with my money? How can I use markets to my advantage? And at the same time, this is a moment of, social media where there is this unprecedented FOMO. And I think during the film, as we this process of really, and I would have to say I'm incredibly grateful for, as crazy as Pro is, how honest he is about his money, and the idea of someone letting you into that personal, I would never let someone follow, have this kind of access to what I'm doing with my money. And it was really interesting to see those dynamics kind of play out. The psychology especially, I think for us, showed us that this could happen to anyone. It's not just people who...
one of these scenes, Pro left his door unlocked so we could sneak in at 4 a.m. and film him while he was sleeping. There's definitely a real trust that subjects or everybody in this film was willing to give us, and such big collaborators on the project.
One thing, especially coming from my economics perspective, it's seeing, the younger people and the different people we saw in this movie. How would you see, do they make a distinction between gambling and investing? And if so, what's that distinction, do you think?
Yeah, great question. One surprise audience for this film, we it premiered at Tribeca in June, and we've been doing tours with it, a lot of screenings all over the place, has been actually gambling conferences and casinos wanting to have conversations about the new manifestations of how gambling behavior is playing out on the internet, whether that's in crypto or if it's in sports betting. It's not the traditional casino-based gambling for many young people. And so I think what's been really fun at a lot of those events, one practitioner defined it to me as the spectrum between you have investing, speculation and gambling, and it is a spectrum that you're moving along between them. But I think for a lot of young people, Pro, for example, was fighting back against the idea that investing in crypto was gambling. To him, he thinks that investing in stocks is also gambling, that what people on Wall Street are doing is gambling. There's a lot of distrust of traditional financial institutions that I think is at a backbone of a lot of this movement we've been seeing, whether it's in crypto or other retail trader movements. And I think, so I think, not everyone does think it's gambling.
I think we had a really interesting screening at kind of like a business program at a university. And Chris, you asked how many people got their, in this kind of finance program, got their financial information from TikTok. And the professor was like blown away because the entire class raised their hands.
Almost everyone in the class raised their hands. Then we started digging into it more, and it's the most recent stat that was released is 79% of young people, their primary source of financial information is TikTok and YouTube. So that's where we are. And I don't know, I mean, students here, do you guys get your information from, anyone go to YouTube or TikTok for information? Okay, well, CMC is really holding it down.
They also know a couple of their professors are
Yeah, exactly. Or your professors
I follow people who I enjoy, but I think it's again this moment of like, do people have social media literacy? Do people understand the creator economy and the incentives behind it that you see play out with Pro's story? He's made a lot of money, and I would say not in an ethical way.
Well, I think it brings up this really, and we've had some good conversations at creator conferences with Pro about, he's made almost $700,000, but what he's doing is he's getting paid by crypto coins to talk about coins, and then when he talks about it on YouTube, the price goes up, everybody's buying into it, so the price is increasing, and then the original people can sell and get out. It's a zero-sum game, and I think, from his perspective, he's like, well, I held Dogecoin for the community. And I think you really saw that play out, that to him, so much of, I think, why he ended up holding wasn't even a financial decision. It was feeling, he's a guy who was lonely and finally had a community that was really paying attention to him. And I get that. It's really nice when you're on the front page of the New York Times, and that's amazing. And then I think a second element for him was he'd never come into wealth at all in his life before. And as an undocumented immigrant, felt like there really weren't many paths to the middle class for him. And so he was looking for some way to kind of leapfrog forward and advance himself. And I think he's not alone in that, in a country where, 9 out of 10 stocks, or 90% of stocks are owned by 10% of Americans. Like, we do have a massive wealth inequality issue that I think, is also contributing to a lot of the factors that we see here. I don't think they're just, anyone who's buying crypto is just an idiot.
Yeah, I mean, one of the parallels I see in this film between kind of the meme stocks and the crypto is kind of parallels the rise in populism, not just Trump, but Bernie Sanders, the distrust of institutions, of experts. How do you see that kind of, was that part of the story you were thinking? Do you see it less so or more so than I do in some sense?
Oh, I think it's very apparent. I mean, all of Pro's friends, like the crew, his like kind of rap crew, basically shared in a lot of those distrusts of institutions. Felt like they were kind of beat down their whole lives by kind of mainstream society, and like they saw this space as a way to fight back. And that narrative, I mean, we saw it play out in GameStop. Most people lost money in that situation.
Including me.
Yes, including Chris. It's your fighting back. But yeah, I mean, I think we saw that over and over and over again. And it's just really, really common.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it does come down to, there's been really effective marketing schemes at play here too, from a standpoint of the amount of money that's being put into it. You talk about last year's Super Bowl as the crypto bowl, people called it, where we had some clips of it in here of Matt Damon or others saying, fortune favors the brave, right? And if you don't have to understand what this is, just put your money in it. There's a lot of elements that are driving you to participate in this, and I think crypto has been very good at building off of this anti-establishment. We're gonna remove the middlemen. We're gonna work outside of the traditional system you don't trust, and so come with us. And I think they've been very good at bringing people into that.
Yeah. I also wanted to bring up your company, Optimist. You know, I know this is a large organization. How are you what other parts of Optimist are working in kind of conjunction with this film right now?
I'd say we're more a small organization that does a lot of things. No, but we're really proud. This film's a great example. So with every film, you know, we equally invest in the film and in an impact campaign. And for us, this film is really exciting because we've actually split it up into modules, and you know, that specifically tell the story of Sinai, tell the story of Kayla, and we partnered with a coalition of nonprofits to do financial education, especially with high schoolers. And so this film next week will be sent out, kind of broken up into modules with curriculum attached to over 3 million students in the United States. And we really see films as this like way to emotionally connect to an issue, to spark this interest. Documentaries aren't the best at like teaching you that much, but they can really get you to connect. And then within that moment of connection, like right now, we really hope that we can provide opportunities for people to change their own lives and also get involved in changing bigger societal issues. And so that's kind of the mission of Optimist, is with every film, we think we can create some sort of tangible impact with like real tangible outcomes.
But yeah, we are not a big organization. there are 5 of us, and really these films, they thrive on community, right? Of people who want to help amplify these. We don't have marketing budgets. This is about grassroots movements. And I think, you know, for a film like this, if any of you like the film, you know, it's releasing on Apple for pre-sale December 1st. So it'll be up in a moment. And part of the goal is, hey, if we get a bunch of people to buy this on pre-sale, it'll then be the #1 film on iTunes. Then it starts to churn and it becomes its whole own thing. And so, you know, any of you who want to support the film, please gift it to a friend or share it around, and that can make a big difference for us. Or if anyone wants to, you know, send this to your high school teacher, we've got a full free curriculum that we have to share around. Or if you have a company or organization that your parents are working for that want to host a screening, that stuff is really key to us getting this film out there.
And you know, one cool thing is I think we've had over 20 CMC interns at this point. 2 of them fellows during COVID, who we hired one. We just created another film called Abundance, with Owen, who directed that, who started out as our intern, has worked with us for the last 7 years or so. So CMC has actually been a big part of Optimist.
And applications are open.
Yeah.
Well, that's terrific. I want to leave ample time for questions here, so why don't we open it up for some questions?
Thank you so much. We'll now be moving into the Q&A portion of the evening, as Professor Bjork said. So if you have a question, please come up and line up along one of these 2 walls, according to the one you're closest to. You introduce yourself, name, major, that sort of thing, and please keep your questions brief so we can get to everyone. Thank you so much.
Hello, I'm Ritvij, an econ major sophomore. I was actually one of the first people on Wall Street Bets, if I think about it, as far as posting due diligences. I was getting upvotes. I was getting on Discords and being like, hey, invest in this. And I was doing actual financial analysis, which was hilarious, and people were reading it. And so I'm kind of wondering now,
what's your username?
I don't want to disclose that. I feel like I'd be doxing myself. But
doxing him, Chris.
Yeah. But
probably read your stuff.
The posts are still up there, which is really funny. And so I've been noticing I actually watched the community kind of start getting less and less active because of rising interest rates and kind of the market becoming a little bit more stable, right? And these institutional funds like BlackRock and stuff, they started investing in crypto. So as this kind of market solidifies, right, and interest rates are higher, do you still see retail investors kind of educating each other at the volume that they were over the pandemic, now that everyone's kind of back to their job and things are becoming more normal?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think yes and no. I mean, I think crypto. I think right now we are seeing an uptick in investment in crypto again, just from a retail volume standpoint over the last month. And Bitcoin's now back up over $36,000, and I think a lot of that is because some of the core factors that we were talking about already, the populism, the loneliness, the things like that still exist, the marketing money. But I do think also it's very correlated with interest rates, like you were saying. How much money do people feel like they have? When they feel like they have more money, speculative assets and investment in speculative assets always rise. So I don't think, crypto just happened to be the newest manifestation of some of this behavior over the last few years, as you saw with Wall Street Bets. There was plenty of other options trading and investing in GameStop and other really risky bets that were happening outside of the crypto space. So it'll be really interesting to see where this goes from here. I mean, I think there's a lot of people who now have crypto accounts opened, who have Robinhood accounts, who the second things start going back up again, what will happen? And my instinct is that we will see a resurgence of very similar behavior from retail, from communities like Wall Street Bets and others, probably to the detriment of most of those investors, including myself.
Thank you.
I'll jump in real quick. I had one question for you. Was you spoke about GameStop a little bit, so that was my understanding, about $1 a share in 2020, jumped up to something like $80 a share, went down again, and I looked right before your talk here, and it's still at $13 a share. Still 13 times as much as it was 3 years ago. That's astounding to me. Is it astounding to you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think GameStop is a company that deserves to be $13 a share. I mean, I think
it was also $480 at its peak. Yeah. So when you look at the scale of how much these things are ebbing and flowing, I mean, there's a lot of volatility,
Yeah, they were also very smart in using that moment as a company to, the people here probably know more than me in this.
But yeah, they raised a lot of money by issuing a lot of new shares and were able to, finance a lot of transformation into the actual company. It is sort of interesting to look at, did they ride the retail movement to actually make fundamental changes in their business model from a cash perspective that maybe will make GameStop actually worth $13? I don't know now, really what its price should be. I haven't really been following it that closely, but those are some of the questions we were asking along the journey. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Sasha. I'm a senior in the econ department. My question comes a little bit more from the government angle. So we've seen some interesting activity on that side of things with China introducing a digital version of the renminbi. Over in the West, we've seen more action from the U.S. government, both with the IRS introducing crypto into their forms and processes, and then also kind of some action including banning mobile coin from U.S. exchanges out of kind of concerns that it was too private. So with that in mind, I guess my question is, specifically if you have any thoughts on central bank digital currency, but more extensively, maybe some broader thoughts on where this is headed, maybe in the West.
Yeah, I mean, the Fed's going to pick up Dogecoin, right?
I mean, I think what we're seeing in China is really alarming because it's potentially an incredible surveillance tool for them. If you know where all this money is and being able to track it and track every single citizen's usage of there is no such thing as cash anymore, that's really scary to me. And so what is the version that I think I'm still very undecided of what does virtual currency look like from issued by a government. I think there's a lot of questions that I have. Maybe you even have more thoughts on this, but I think, yeah, I mean, in some ways, China convinced the crypto crowd that they were going to use open blockchains and kind of crypto was we're going to open up China, and then it became something very, very different. So I'm very curious how that kind of plays out.
Yeah, I don't have much to add on that. I think just more broadly about kind of the more practical uses of cryptocurrency or blockchain technology in general. I mean, I think we're still just watching very closely to see some of the use cases play out more. And we've had the privilege of getting to travel around to a number of different countries around the world and see in certain developing world countries where it has started to be used in an effective way when you have a local currency that is dealing with hyperinflation or something in that. But it's still really, so far, and a lot of the things we've been seeing has been rather limited to financial use cases. And I think there's still a lot of ideas that are being put out there and explored, but we're just watching to see. I think it's too early in some ways to see where some of this stuff goes. It probably won't be Dogecoin, but who knows?
I mean, I think if you want to have a discussion about, I think, basically, if you want to think of this, it's like the dot-com boom came to the internet before the World Wide Web existed to crypto. And if crypto is like this early on, if you're thinking about Ethereum, which is like a more multi-use blockchain that a lot of these meme coins were created on, like the creator of that didn't necessarily see it being used in this way. And so there still is a question of like, what is the value of that technology? Obviously it was way over hyper, like idealized and inflated that it would change the world. And this kind of, I think there's an interesting question of like, is this even similar to the dot-com boom, where actually in the dot-com boom in the 90s, a lot of the infrastructure of the internet was created, even though it was a bubble, and it actually eventually played out as being global, like life-changing, and in some ways, it's unclear if that's what just happened to crypto. Like, did it just build out all this infrastructure and some use case will come out of it? I'm not sure.
Or does it end up just being fairly niche?
Yeah, niche and a speculative asset that people gamble with.
Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is William Galbraith, and I'm a senior from Columbus, Ohio, majoring in organizational studies. And my question is, with the mission that you guys have of creating documentaries that have this tangible impact, I came to the Abundance filming screening a few weeks ago, and now seeing this. How do you guys come up with or nail down your topics that you're going to make documentaries on, and then what does the future look like? What's your next project for your next screening, if you have an idea yet?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think like you have to be passionate about a film topic in order to make it, because it's such, you film hundreds of hours, you edit for thousands of hours, you work through endless late nights.
And you're not doing it to make a bunch of money, and all your friends graduated from CMC and are making a bunch of money.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. So hopefully some of them turn into donors later in life. But I think for us, that they have often been just topics that we've been very personally inspired by, and I think for us, we have this ethos at Optimist that we believe that progress is possible as a result of all of the people we've met around the world who are working to make this world a better place. And Abundance, the film that you referenced, is a short film about this amazing group of students who started what is now the fastest growing nonprofit in America, providing food access to Americans. And it was all done by college students. And I think that just gave us a lot of hope and a lot of inspiration. And we wanted to highlight that sort of story. And so we've got a lot of these people in all of our films that you can find on our website that I hope all kind of help educate, help instill this sense of optimism in the world, because we don't think it's naive to be optimistic. We think it's like actually just very necessary to envision how the world can be better and then just do something to get there.
Yeah, and it's this idea of actionable optimism, right? Like if we're pessimistic, like it's shown not to be, like pessimism doesn't breed change, but actionable and not naive optimism can. Our next project, we have a number of projects in the works. We've actually been co-directing a piece with one of the young men from Guatemala, Peña Blanca. He's now living in San Francisco, undocumented, and he's been writing this love letter to his girlfriend back in Peña Blanca, and it's really fun because in documentary there's this interesting thing of like, what gives us a right to tell these stories? What does the collaboration need to look like to be ethical and supportive and empowering to our subjects? And so this is a fun piece where we're actually co-directing with one of the people that we've known for over 10 years. And
yeah, so Ernesto was actually in our first ever film, Living on $1, that you watched in high school, right? And this has been a relationship that we've been able to develop with this community. We go back each year. We've been able to support the community a lot, develop these friendships. This will be our fourth film made in collaboration with that community. And some of that is the beauty of documentary, right? It's like, these are real people's lives, the people that you're developing these relationships with, and we love seeing where those stories evolve to and to continue to support them. One of our films about the Syrian refugee crisis, After that film finished, we did screenings just like this, and the communities sponsored, privately paid for 3 of the families to be resettled to Canada to start this new home away from a war zone. And you're like, that's just tangible, you know, that's so tangible of the kind of impact that people can make who like this.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Katie. I'm a freshman at CMC, and I'm not sure what my major is going to be. I
That's okay.
also had William's question, but I have a second one lined up, so it's fine. I was wondering, I've noticed kind of this cookie cutter, for lack of a better term, like setup for documentaries where you have your theme and then individual stories that you follow. And I was wondering how you pick out which individual stories to feature when there's so many people who have been affected by things like crypto.
So is this one cookie cutter or not?
Yeah, I was like, are you calling this film cookie cutter? There's so many different approaches to documentaries. A number of our films actually start with the person, and then we kind of like figure out what the theme of the film is. The Undocumented Lawyer, which was one of our films on HBO, was because she was the lawyer of one of our friends from Peña Blanca, and we found out that she was undocumented, and she was like this incredible lawyer, and we just started following her life, and the film kind of evolved from that. So there's a lot of different ways to make documentaries, which is what's so cool, but it's also...
And it's part of the challenge of, you know, you can't write it, right? So this film, you know, we were following Pro and Ray's and these guys, and we had no idea what was going to happen. I mean, when we watched him make his first $1 million, you're like, okay, well now he's going to sell, right? And like that's the end of the movie. And then you're like, okay, he didn't. Now he's up to 2 million. You're like, well, now he'll sell, and then 3 million. And you just don't really know how it was going to play out, where he was going to go. Or, you know, Ray's, for example, we thought the whole time, you know, I still think of him as a cautionary voice in the film, but like, you know, we were seeing the negative impacts on his marriage, on his family. He'd moved into this storage shed to put all his money into this crypto coin. And I was like, this is not going to end up well, right? And then, you know, a year and a half later, he ends up hitting it big on this coin that he won the lottery on, right? And but we could never script that, right? It just happened, and then you have to figure out how that works with the narrative of your film and how you have that play in. And it really just meant that we needed to continue to follow the story even longer. And we found out actually then, a month later, he put all of his money back into crypto, and he was able to, you know, and he ended up losing almost $450,000 on it. So you know some of the behavior that was probably going to play out, but you just don't really know how this will end up.
Yeah, this film also started out as a GameStop film. So it was interesting. But we quickly realized that like the bigger story was about the psychology of money, and that's when we started to try and find 4 people that kind of spanned that spectrum, I guess. And you don't really know where people will end up falling in that story, but in this case, you know, Sanai is on one end and Ray's is probably on the other.
Thank you.
Thanks. Great question.
Hello, my name's Laura. I'm a senior at CMC studying econ and psychology, and it's kind of relating to what you're discussing, but I'm curious, in the film we watch Pros kind of like get pretty sad, and specifically the Taco Bell scene where it's like really quiet and you just watch like all the rappers, that like really had like an impact on my emotions. And when you're filming these documentaries, like how do you manage your emotions? And also I'm curious, do the people in the documentary like almost see you as like a therapist in some regards, because like you see everything and every part of their life and like really specific pieces? So if you could talk about that, that'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple moments that stand out to me filming this film. One was sitting in the room, you know, and Pro's house is the size of like this, right? And
180 square feet.
Yeah, and so it's me, the cinematographer, and a sound person, and we're sitting there watching him watch SNL. And at one point, it's like $3 million, and I just wanted to scream and be like, sell the Dogecoin. Like, I don't care about the documentary. Pro, sell the Dogecoin. Like, I was just like, this is crazy. And I was like tearing my hair out. And I just was in disbelief, because I'm a documentary filmmaker, and I was like, if I had $3 million, like, that'd be great. So yeah, I mean, there is just like a professionalism, and, you know, it's our work, and there is some sort of journalistic kind of ethics that we abide by, that to not intervene in these stories. And I think we see our role as it's, you know, important to tell these stories and to give an honest, you know, not having too much influence on it. There have been moments, though, in documentaries where we have intervened. We did a film called 5 Years North that premiered on America Reframed on PBS, and you know, one of those moments, a young 16-year-old kid, undocumented Guatemalan kid from Peña Blanca, was having a mental breakdown, and we were like, there's nothing in the world that makes this movie worth it to not get him the support he needs. And so there's moments as filmmakers when we're like, this is not about making this film. This is about someone's real life, and we're here and we can support. And so there's a lot of gray area, but at moments we've intervened.
And then to the therapist question, I mean, the
amount that Pro and Ray's call Chris is so crazy.
It's a, you know, but like that was my job, right? It was like, and so yeah, 3-hour-long calls, like listening through different challenges and things, and like often for somebody who doesn't have a therapist, who comes into your life and asks you the most intimate questions about your life, talking about your motivations, meets your mom, goes through all these things. Like there was, you know, I talked to Pro every day for 2 years, right? And so yeah, like he jokes that I was his therapist, right? Like we had that, like there's an element where you're just trying to pull as much, get to understand this person as much as possible to try to help bring that across on film, right? Because there's the Pro that he puts out on YouTube to all his fans and followers, and then there's the Pro behind the scenes, right? Like the Taco Bell sort of moment that like, those to me are the most powerful, or him walking with his laundry at night, like when everything is quiet, he's not getting the validation from the internet constantly, and he's just forced to sort of sit in silence, that were some of the most powerful moments to us as we were filming them, and we wanted to kind of have those come across, because I think there was a lot of loneliness for Pro. Like he had both this huge excitement and thrill-seeking, adrenaline-pumping moments, and then a lot of just quiet, sad moments alone. Yeah.
Thank you.
Howdy. How's it going? Hi, my name's Andrew Shelton. I'm from Southern Missouri. And just want to say I love the film. And I'm interested in media studies, theater type stuff. And watching the film, I just was really curious, how did you find yourself, I mean, you kind of touched on it and like your interest in crypto, but how did you end up finding yourselves in the filmmaking sphere? And could you possibly touch on like your process and how you kind of go about making these films?
Well, it was very unexpected and accidental. I mean, Professor Ta can attest, both of our senior advisors, Professor Björk is one of our favorite econ professors. Like, at no point...
It's not the favorite, yeah.
Our favorite. No one else is here, right? But I did a Deloitte strategy and operations consulting job junior summer. Chris did a marketing internship junior summer. Like, at no point did we expect to become filmmakers while we were at CMC.
I mean, honestly, we didn't even think it was like a career path you could do.
That was viable.
That was viable. And I think, you know, again, I love, you know, like CMC elevates everything that you do. The pressure to succeed financially is really intense. And I think we can put words to that. That's okay. And I think trying to make the decision to start a nonprofit on a fledgling documentary that we hadn't really shown to many people was incredibly scary when we began it, and was probably a stupid financial decision with student loans and all of these things that had to pay. But like, you know.
But I think the thing that CMC allowed us to do is take really big risks. Yeah. So from freshman year, when Professor Ta had Chris and I in her intro to IR class, like, we both had interest in microfinance. We connected over that. Chris had already started a network to provide students with opportunities in microfinance. We got CMC to like send us to Colombia and Kenya and organizing these conferences. We ended up putting on these like huge virtual classes to thousands of kids all around the United States with a Stanford professor. I mean, like, CMC allowed us to do all this stuff while we were here as students.
While here.
And the thing is, the stakes were low, right? Like, I didn't have to go and, you know, pay rent for me and my boyfriend, right? Like, I was like in a dorm, and if something failed, this film failed, this thing we just did for our sophomore summers in Guatemala failed, like, who cared? And so my encouragement is take as many risks as you can while you're at CMC. And what we did, I think, was really smart is right after CMC, we were like, we actually had something to show people that we were committed to this idea of a documentary. We weren't just like cold emailing people with like, I have these ideas about documentaries that I want to talk to you about. It's like, no, we went and shot this stuff in Guatemala. We have 1 million views on YouTube. Like, can help us make this into a documentary film. And then we literally went out and emailed the top people from CMC alumni's list, the former CEO of Miramax, the LA executive Jeff Klein, who's incredible, David Dosters, the former executive producer of Anderson Cooper 360, just straight cold emailed them, and they became the executive producers of our first film, helped us find distribution and get it on Netflix. So yes, we made maybe a risky decision having student loans, my parents being like, what are you doing with your life? But I think we had taken so many risks together during CMC that
by the time we graduated, we weren't starting cold, right? It
Yeah.
was like there was all of these things and momentum and relationships already, so that we felt the confidence to say, hey, we're going to do 6 months. And that was the plan, was like, we're going to take 6 months and give this a shot. We premiered our first film, Living on $1, the week of graduation on campus. That was the first time we'd shown it to anyone, and we were like, all right, we're going to do this
thing. And we went and lived in a 1978 school bus for 4 months, traveling around the country, showing it just to colleges. And it got media press and ended up, #1 on iTunes and eventually on Netflix. So I think it's just like, sometimes at CMC you're like, oh, I need to have this like 5-year, 10-year, whatever plan. But the
20.
reality is, like, I think us taking just that 6 months to like take risks really has paid off for us. And I think we're so happy in the work that we get to do now.
I was just going to interrupt with a quick anecdote because I use these guys in a story I tell a lot, which was I was a second-year professor here when I had them in my class, and before the class started, I think it was Chris, but I don't remember for sure, one of you guys emailed me and said, hey, we're excited to be in your class. Oh, and by the way, we're making a documentary about living on $1. And I, of course, thought, well, that's great. I hear college projects all the time. Lo and behold, 15 years later, we're sitting on stage after they've done all these things, and I just tell everybody that's how CMC works often is, yeah, you're making a little movie, sure, and the next thing we know, it's a full career. So congratulations to you.
Yeah, it's been a fun journey, and I think the other thing that I really appreciate from CMC is like we as artists are running a business, and I think a lot of people don't make it in the industry, in the documentary industry, because they don't realize that to be sustainable, you have to be running a business, and CMC at least prepared us for that side. I think we've had to learn about the filmmaking side from other places, but
figuring out how to be really entrepreneurial, finding a bunch of different ways to piece these things together. Yeah.
Thank you.
I have a question. So Optimist is, as far as I know, is more operated like a nonprofit studio, and especially with everything happening in the movie industry right now, how are you different from a normal movie studio? How does this impact your businesses? Are there any specific things that you're doing to navigate this tough situation with the interest rates are, with like a lot of like Netflix, HBO trying to maximize more like profit-making businesses?
Yeah, so Optimist is set up as a nonprofit. When you're a nonprofit, we still try so we rely on donations and generous donations of so many people in the CMC community, Dave, yourself, other people who have supported the work with what they had along the way to help get these films up off the ground. And then we hope that if we can get the films out on Netflix or elsewhere, we can make money off of that we can reinvest back into the nonprofit so that we can do the educational campaigns, we can offer the curriculums that, like Zach was talking about before, we can do the kinds of work with our nonprofit partners that we want to do. And so, we end up being this kind of blended model here of a nonprofit that really needs donations to make the movies, but we try to be entrepreneurial with merchandise, with selling the films, with doing speaking tours, with just any sort of creative
being
elements.
hired out as directors for commercials or other kind of more other projects, which all kind of comes back into Optimist and kind of funds our core team. So it is like being really creative in the space. The documentary space isn't really affected by the strikes. Documentary doesn't really have a union that works for us. But this kind of downturn in the market has created, and streamers really cutting back on budgets does affect us pretty intimately. And it makes our donor community that much more important because we still get to make films that we believe in, that are independent, that are about issues that maybe aren't as commercial as some filmmakers are kind of being forced to make. So we're really feel very honored and privileged to be able to have this community around Optimist that funds kind of those early ideas that we really care about.
And to keep all the films, independent in that way.
Oh, sounds great. Thank you. And with that question, I'm going to close out the evening. Thank you so much for this. The movie was amazing. Thank you so much for the Q&A. Thanks everyone for coming. Have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you all for
Thank you,
watching.
Dave.
Thanks.